And of course, we still have anarchy and catastrophe on our southern border, and our politicians are reacting exactly the wrong way. I heard some Republican running for governor this morning, I won't mention him because I don't want to embarrass him, going on about how we have to be humane to the people who are coming across the border. Okay, we can be humane to the people who are coming across the border, but we can also deport them. I thought it was important, folks, as I'm wont to do, to really dig into some history here, because you hear all the time that we're turning our back on our history. We were a nation of immigrants, and so forth and so on. Well, every country is a nation of immigrants. What does that have to do with anything? We're talking about legal versus illegal immigration. I found a piece about Dwight Eisenhower. Now, Dwight Eisenhower, was he a radical right-wing Tea Party conservative Republican? He's broadly praised by Republicans and Democrats as a very solid president who did very solid things. Well, he did something many of you may not know about. About 60 years ago today, and it was explained by John Dillon. He was the former managing editor of the Christian Science Monitor. And about 8 years ago, almost to the day, Mr. Dillon wrote a piece for the Christian Science Monitor. At that point, we were dealing with George W. Bush and his push for amnesty. Now, you really need to listen to some of the history here, and you'll know more than anybody on Capitol Hill, you'll know more than any other commentator, and you'll realize that you're right, and historically you're right. Now, Dillon wrote, this is 8 years ago, George W. Bush isn't the first Republican president to face a full-blown immigration crisis on the U.S.-Mexican border. He said 53 years ago, it would be 61 years ago now, when newly elected Dwight Eisenhower moved into the White House, America's southern frontier was as porous as a spaghetti sieve. As many as 3 million illegal immigrants had walked and waded northward over a period of several years for jobs in California, Arizona, Texas, and points beyond. Eisenhower cut off this illegal traffic. He did it quickly and decisively, with only 1,075 United States Border Patrol agents, less than 1/10 of today's force. And I dare say it's smaller now. The operation is still highly praised among veterans of the Border Patrol. Although there's little to no record of this operation in Ike's official papers, one piece of historic evidence indicates how he felt in a note that he had sent to Senator William Fulbright of Arkansas. Eisenhower, who was gearing up for his run for the presidency, told Fulbright that he was very concerned about, quote, the rise in illegal border crossings by Mexican, and I'm not going to use the word, to current rate of more than 1 million cases a year has been accompanied by a curious relaxation in ethical standards extending all the way from the farmer exploiters of this contraband labor to the highest levels of the federal government. He's talking about the lawbreakers, the businessmen, and those who were tolerating it, senior officials in the federal government. Years later, the late Herbert Brownell Jr., Eisenhower's first attorney general, said in an interview, the president had a sense of urgency about illegal immigration when he took office. He said America was faced with a breakdown in law enforcement on a very large scale. And when I say large scale, I mean hundreds of thousands were coming in from Mexico every year without restraint. Although an on and off again guest worker program for Mexicans was operating at the time, farmers and ranchers in the Southwest had become dependent on additional low-cost, docile, illegal labor force of up to 3 million, mostly Mexican laborers, reports Mr. Dillon. I'm skipping around a little bit here because it's too long. And what they point out is that there was a relationship between a number of these big businessmen and big ranchers and big farmer entities and those responsible for securing the border where they would look the other way. Profits from illegal labor led to the kind of corruption that apparently worried Eisenhower. Joseph White, a retired 21-year vet of the Border Patrol, says that in the early 50s, some senior U.S. officials overseeing immigration enforcement had friends among the ranchers and others, and agents did not dare arrest their illegal workers. Walt Edwards, who joined the Border Patrol in 1951, tells a similar story. He says, when we caught illegal aliens on farms and ranches, the farmer or rancher would often call and complain to officials in El Paso. And depending on how politically connected they were, there would be political intervention. That's how we got into the mess we are in now. During the 1950s, this good old boy system changed under Eisenhower, if only for 10 years. In 1954, just 60 years ago, Eisenhower appointed retired General Joseph Swing, a former West Point classmate and veteran of the 101st Airborne, as his new IRS commissioner. Politicians like Lyndon Johnson and Pat McCarran, senator of Nevada, favored open borders and were dead set against strong border enforcement, Eisenhower's attorney general at the time, Brownell, said. But General Swing's close connections to the president shielded him and the Border Patrol from their meddling. And one of the general's first decisive acts was to transfer certain entrenched immigration officials out of the border area to other regions of the country where their political connections with Johnson and McCarran had no effect. Then on June 17, 1954, what was called Operation Wet, you know what, began. They called it Operation Wetback. You can see it's part of history. I'm not calling it that. They called it that. Because political resistance was lower in California and Arizona, the roundup of aliens began there. 750 agents swept northward through agricultural areas with a goal of 1,000 apprehensions a day. By the end of July, over 50,000 aliens were caught in the two states. Another nearly 500,000, fearing arrest, fled the country. This is what Romney called, correctly, and he borrowed it from others, self-deportation. Now you're not even allowed to say that. By mid-July, the crackdown extended northward into Utah, Nevada, Idaho, and eastward to Texas. By September, 80,000 had been taken into custody in Texas. An estimated 500,000 to 700,000 illegals left the Lone Star State voluntarily. Self-deportation. And unlike today, illegals caught in the roundup were not simply released at the border, where they could easily re-enter the U.S. To discourage their return, General Swing arranged for buses and trains to take many of them deep within Mexico before setting them free. Tens of thousands more were put aboard two hired ships, the Emancipation and the Mercurio. The ships ferried the aliens from Port Isabel, Texas, to Veracruz, Mexico, more than 500 miles south. There are now said to be 12 to 20 million illegal aliens in the U.S. It's amazing to me how that number never changes. And of those who live here, an estimated 85% are here illegally. One day in 1954, Border Patrol agent Walt Edwards picked up a newspaper in Big Spring, Texas, and saw some startling news. The government was launching an all-out drive to oust illegal aliens from the United States. And so this is what Eisenhower did. And he was very serious about it. And he put a general in charge of the project. This piece, July 6, 2006, John Dillon, Christian Science Monitor. He wasn't called a xenophobe. He wasn't called a racist. He wasn't called inhumane. And you can see what's happened in 60 years' time. Now people come here illegally, and they get lawyers. Now people come here illegally, and they get in-state tuition. Now people come in here illegally, they go to public school. They get free medical care. Now people come illegally, and the court orders that they get driver's licenses. Now people come here illegally, and the United States Supreme Court, in an outrageous 5-3 decision, rules that the President of the United States is free to ignore the immigration laws of the country. They call it prosecutorial discretion. A lot's changed in 60 years, and most of it not good. Certainly in this respect. Certainly in this respect. We won't secure the border. We won't deport a sizable number of people who are here illegally. Quite the contrary. We are conferring benefits, we are conferring rights, and to the detriment of society generally, and to the detriment of the American citizenry. Eisenhower understood it, and he wasn't the only one. When we come back, there was another man who understood it. He's been praised by Barack Obama. He's been praised by the radical leftist who today runs the Labor Department and used to run an illegal immigrant rights group in Maryland, Thomas Perez. There was a man who was violently opposed to illegal immigration. His name, Cesar Chavez. 1960s and 70s would report sightings of illegal aliens to the Immigration and Naturalization Service. In 1969, Cesar Chavez led a march accompanied by Ralph Abernathy, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the man who was number 2 to Martin Luther King, and then Senator Walter Mondale, along the border with Mexico, protesting the farmers' use of illegal aliens. So much has changed since then. Now this is all for the good, and there's something wrong with us. The Democrat Party has understood for decades the import of illegal aliens and the need to turn them into citizens and voters. Historian Sam Lubell points out that the Democrat Party found a new source of political clout that favors them. That is, illegal immigrants. He notes that the voting-age children of the first great migration into this country, legal and illegal, constituted, quote, the big city masses who furnished the votes which reelected Franklin Roosevelt again and again and again, and in the process ended the traditional Republican majority in this country. Something the damn fool Republican leaders in this country don't get and never will. I've given up on them completely. And the situation legally is even worse than it was under FDR, because now we grant chain migration to illegal aliens. That is, illegal aliens who have their children here. That did not exist when FDR was president. See, you're being told over and over again what the history of immigration is in this country, with platitudes, with a couple sentences here and there. I'm explaining to you the real history. The real history. Now, I started today, I didn't get to finish. I said, let me look at the 3 countries where most of these people are coming from lately. And by the way, it's more than 3 countries. And it's not just Central and South America. It's China. It's a number of other places. It's the Middle East. People are pouring over this border. We have no idea who they are. We have no idea where they're going. But we know several countries. We know, for instance, El Salvador and Honduras. I didn't have time to get to Guatemala. You can look it up yourself. Here's the general requirements in El Salvador to obtain a work permit. A legal work permit if you're a U.S. citizen. Here are the requirements. Number 1, El Salvador. Application completed by the company hiring the applicant, stating wages, duration of the employee's services. Number 2, the original birth certificate, and have it translated into Spanish. Number 3, police records, translated into Spanish. Number 4, the record should reflect residence of the applicant for the past 2 years in the country where he or she lived. These are the requirements. These are just the general requirements for a company hiring a U.S. citizen on a temporary work permit. The record should reflect residence of the applicant for the past 2 years in the country where he or she lived. Medical report from a Salvadoran physician stating the applicant does not suffer from a contagious disease. 2 copies of the applicant's passport or evidence of the applicant's citizenship. 2 copies of the company's deed with whatever modifications the company experienced. A complete application for the Salvadoran Labor Department, and on and on. That's if you're coming through the front door. What about Honduras? According to the Honduras Embassy website, you will need to employ the services of an attorney in Honduras to assemble your document package and be pre-approved if you want a temporary work status and you're a U.S. citizen. You'll need to fill out an application form and submit it along with an affidavit that you will honor and obey all the laws of Honduras. You must provide a criminal record or police report from the areas where you have lived to prove you aren't wanted as a criminal. You also need health documents from an institution or hospital recognized by Honduras. And you can, let's see here, you need an official copy of your birth certificate and copies of all the pages of your passport. And your passport must have been valid for at least the past 6 months prior to your entry. If you want to bring a wife and family member, you also need their passports and birth certificates and a marriage certificate. Now, if you migrate to work, you must provide a copy of your employment contract. And if you're retired, you need to prove you earn a pension of $1,500 a month. If you're not working or retired, you need to prove you have an income of at least $2,500 a month. In other words, Honduras doesn't want welfare cases. Honduras has no intention of subsidizing foreigners coming into their country, even legally. El Salvador and Honduras. And if I were to go through the other countries, Guatemala, China, you'd get the same or worse. And in the past, I've gone through what Mexico's rules are. You get across our border, hey, will you show up in 3, 4, 5 years for your administrative hearing? Sure I will. 85 to 90% never show up. And then we're told they're living in the shadows. We have to entice them to come out of the shadows and treat them like human beings. Yes. In-state tuition, driver's licenses, whatever you do, don't ask them about their health, their criminal background. Certainly don't ask them where they're from, because that would be racism, rampant racism. In fact, whomever they are, wherever they're from, whatever their background, in-state tuition, driver's licenses. We've got sanctuary states. We've got sanctuary cities. And yet the Supreme Court rules that only the federal government can determine our immigration rules in this country. Amazing, isn't it? Then we have Jeb Bush, who obviously knows every single illegal alien coming into the country, who says they come here for love. They come here for love. What an idiot. We have the Democrats working as hard as they possibly can to legalize and then confer citizenship on people they know nothing about. People coming into this country with diseases we've conquered as a free people. Now we're importing them knowingly. Everybody coming across that border is not a saint. Everybody coming across that border is not well behaved. We know this from our own history with illegal aliens. Our prisons are full of illegal alien criminals. So everybody's not coming here for love. Some of them are coming here for hate. And if we don't have a lawful, organized, manageable system, we don't know who's coming here and why they're coming here. You would have thought after 9/11 that our immigration policies would have been strengthened rather than weakened. That people who overstay their visas are tracked down and thrown the hell out of the country. Student visas, work visas, whatever visas. That's exactly what the terrorists used on 9/11. You would think that we want to secure the border, knowing what's going on in the Middle East. You would think we want to secure the border, knowing that we've been hit by terrorists even since 9/11. Ask the people in Boston. Oh, I know they didn't come through the southern border. I'm talking about our entire immigration system. This is absolutely irresponsible, unconscionable, what these politicians and bureaucrats and ethnic front groups and foreign countries are doing to this country. And then we have to be lectured. We're told there's something wrong with us, that we're against free enterprise, that we're against individual liberty, that somehow we're un-American. I just told you what Dwight Eisenhower did. Was he un-American? The man who led our forces on D-Day and so many other days during World War II? I just told you what Cesar Chavez did and what he believed. Will the radical left now embrace him or pretend none of that history exists? A country cannot survive this way. It simply cannot survive this way. When its language is under attack, when its culture is under attack, when its school system, its law enforcement system, its hospitals are under attack. A country cannot survive this. I don't care what country it is. I don't care what aliens we're talking about. There needs to be assimilation. And yet we get balkanization. And the politics are such right now that it's only becoming increasingly more difficult to get rational decisions made by politicians in Washington, D.C. The Democrat Party is a fascist party, in my humble opinion. It's not interested in rational decisions. It's interested in power. Power, power, power. And it's through the party. The Republican Party has surrendered to the corporatists. It has surrendered to the U.S. Chamber of Crony Capitalism. And it will do anything to defeat the freedom wing of the Republican Party. And from now on, that's who we are and that's what we are. The freedom wing of the Republican Party. Open borders is not the modern history of the United States. Illegal immigration is not the modern history of the United States. Unless you ignore Truman and Eisenhower and Cesar Chavez and Ralph Abernathy and the Union movement. Unless you ignore them. And I want you to know when our immigration laws were fundamentally altered in 1965. 1965, part of the 1960s radical movement. It was Republicans who objected and said this day would come, and this day has come. It was Republicans who objected. Now, we can't win elections like this. We're not going to win elections like this. But there's even something more important than party politics. What kind of country do we want? Where anybody from anywhere can come in, whatever their intentions, whomever they are, whether they're going to contribute to society or take from society? Is this what your ancestors have built and your ancestors' ancestors have built? We're not against immigration. We're against chaos, anarchy, catastrophe. We're against a massive welfare state. And that's what it's attracting people to this country, the massive welfare state. Because we're not expanding freedom and opportunity in America, not under this president. We're shrinking it. This is the history that they won't tell you about and that you now know about. MS-13 gang members leave graffiti on bathroom walls of the Nogales Border Patrol Processing Center, writes Katie Pavlich, townhall.com. But Obama won't see that because Obama didn't go to any Border Patrol Processing Center and he didn't go to the border. Very, very busy. You know, after he's done in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, creating havoc and chaos and anarchy from sea to shining sea, off to vacation, Martha's Vineyard. See, he goes to places where none of these problems exist. Martha's Vineyard. It's an island. Aspen, Colorado. Not exactly a hub of illegal immigration. Not a lot of 7-Elevens there. Oh, let's see. Hawaii. Or, as they say in Hawaii, Hawaii. Where Obama spent some of his best years learning to be a communist and smoking pot and snorting cocaine. Don't blame me. It's in his 2 wonderful masterpiece self-serving autobiographies. Not a huge problem there with illegal immigration. Let's see. It's as if Obama chooses his vacation spots and the misses to avoid illegal immigration. Palm Springs. Oh, no problems there. All kinds of global warming, though. So no, the MS-13 gang, that's your problem. That's the problem in your communities. Obama's never going to have to deal with it. His kids are never going to have to deal with it. The missus, no. When they retire and she's busy out there working on her, organic garden, she won't have to worry about it either. Then look at this. Also by Katie Pavlich at townhall.com. Illegal, unaccompanied minors being held for placement in U.S. admit to engaging in torture and murder. Whoa! Torture and murder. Aren't we against that? I thought they were escaping torture and murder. No, they're bringing it to the USA. Folks, do you really think El Salvador, Guatemala, and what's the other one? I can't remember. Do you really think these countries are just letting their people leave? Don't you think, included among those who they're sending here, that is the poor, they're illiterate, many with diseases and so forth, are some of their worst criminals, some of their young criminals that they want to get rid of? Don't you think so? Honduras, that's the other one. And, of course, our dear, good friends to the south, the corrupt Mexican government, just sends them right through. Come on through. Don't stay here. We'll throw you in prison. Come on through. We know where you want to go. The United States of America, where you will not be deported, despite what Obama is saying. It's quite appalling. I read a piece today in the Washington Examiner by a friend of mine who has a column. He says, no, you can't impeach Obama. If you impeach Obama, the same charges could have been brought against Bush. Huh? Really? Oh, yes. You should have seen the Conyers, the John Conyers package that he put together against Bush. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Barack Obama, by every measure that I don't have to detail to you because you're well aware of it, is the most lawless president I've ever seen, and perhaps in American history, and I would claim in American history. And this is his ideological bent, it's his temperament, it's who he is, it's what he does. To suggest that his violations of law, his brazen violations of law, his desire to usurp the Constitution and separation of powers, his orders to his cabinet, to his flunkies, to look for every way possible to rule without Congress and in defiance of the courts and the law, to suggest, well, if you impeach Obama, you would have had to impeach George W. Bush, is insanity. Some of us have spoken out and did speak out against certain of Bush's actions, but the mens rea, if you will, involved in what Obama's doing, the ideological motivation in what Obama's doing, and the fact that he's doing it in many cases for the purpose of defying the rule of law and usurping the Constitution. To compare that to George W. Bush is nuts, I say with all due respect. You know the system is broken. You know Congress is broken. You know their mouthpieces in the media, the pseudo-conservative media and the rest, are really quite useless. When Obama, the biggest lawbreaker of lawbreaking presidents in my humble opinion, when Obama is able to escape impeachment because we're told it's not viable. Worse yet, we're told that if we pursue it, it'll elect more Democrats. Do you really think the solutions for what's going on in Washington are in Washington? Or do you believe the solutions are in the state legislatures like the framers knew in the end they'd have to be? I want to give you some more hard facts, some more hard information you're not going to get anywhere else. In fact, you're going to get propaganda everywhere else on this issue of immigration and illegal immigration. This is very, very serious. Obama's asked for $3.7 billion, not to further secure the border, to take care of the people who've come here illegally, which of course will encourage more to come here illegally. He's not doing what needs to be done to secure the border. He has no intention of doing it, period. Now, you need to understand, despite the propaganda from the Bushes, from their former staffers, their current staffers, Rupert Murdoch, among others, in 2008, a Manhattan Institute study measuring immigrant assimilation in the United States found that the current level of assimilation of all recent immigrant groups is lower than at any time during the first Great Migration early in the 20th century. Balkanization, because our government encourages it. Our laws encourage groupthink. Ethnic front groups encourage balkanization, tribalization. We're going backwards, not forward. While some ethnic groups assimilate better than others, this is the Manhattan Institute, not Mark Levin, and for different reasons, Mexicans were the least assimilated overall, and were assimilating at the slowest rate. Even those Mexicans who came to the United States as children, 5 and younger, showed discouraging trends. They are more likely than other ethnic immigrant groups to be teen mothers or incarcerated. And it goes on. Again, this isn't me. These are the facts. These are the statistics. When you hear John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Jeb Bush and all the other fools going on and on about this, it's like global warming. They reject evidence. They reject facts. Instead, they're trying to work on your emotions. I don't care what motivates them. I care that they're succeeding. There's no reason whatsoever we shouldn't have a secure southern border. And then debate immigration and what we're going to do with illegals. But there's no reason we shouldn't be securing that border. None. No legitimate reason. Period. Oh, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but as far as I'm concerned, our existence is not to serve the interests of the politicians in Washington. Our existence is not to serve the political agenda of Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama. Our existence is not to serve the interests of the U.S. Chamber of Crony Capitalism and the corporatists and the Republicans they've bought off. We're the citizenry. We're the people. We're the sovereign. They can try and say whatever they want. Was Milton Friedman wrong? I played it last week or the week before when he said you cannot have open borders in a welfare state. Was Dwight Eisenhower wrong when he said, look, illegal aliens are dragging down our economy. We need to make room for jobs for Americans. Was Harry Truman wrong? Was Cesar Chavez wrong? Was Ralph Abernathy wrong? No, they weren't. You may disagree with some of their tactics, with some of their statements, but as a fundamental matter, their actions were consistent with much of American history. Certainly American history after the Civil War. We've never been, certainly not in the last 150 years, an open border state, ladies and gentlemen. Never. Despite what you hear on radio by some talkers, despite what you see on TV by some, despite some of these billionaires and millionaires popping off about things they do not know, it's time we put our country first. It's time we put our citizenship first. It's time these people realize that they report to us. We don't report to them. So now almost $4 billion because Obama wouldn't secure the border, because Obama sent signal after signal after signal he wasn't going to enforce our immigration laws, because the Supreme Court gave him a blank slate. Now you and I have to pay up? Let me tell you something else about $3.7 billion. Keep this in mind, too. Every single penny we are spending from this moment forward, we don't have. We have a $17.6 trillion fiscal operating debt and over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So another $3.7 billion. That's money coming out of the pockets of your children and your grandchildren and your children yet born. This is their burden. So we actually have your children and grandchildren and children yet born subsidizing this. Is that humane? Is that compassionate? It's none of those things. It's none of those things. You want to know how to kill a country? You're watching it. It's not even fundamental transformation. It's suicide. There's nothing to do with ethnicity or skin color, whatever. We're not talking about that. This is just common sense. I mean, I've got the statistics and the evidence, but it's also common sense.